And we're back.
I know it's been a couple of weeks, right? We had the holiday time and enjoyed New Year and all that kind of fun, but here we are. It's and we just had our sales kickoff this week for Datto, our day job. So yeah, it's been a relaxing, busy couple of weeks, but here we are.
That's interesting. A relaxing, busy time. And it's interesting because you try to, I don't know if it happened to you. You try to wind down, but then all of a sudden, all these things keep popping up. And if it's not at work, I don't know if it's you, if your wife does the same thing. But when I have some time down, my wife brings this list that is like gigantic. I say, oh, we need to do this, and we need to do that, and we need to do this. Um, but welcome to all our audience. Thank you for being with us again. Mike, it's a new year,
It is, yes. Yeah,
but
and
some of the same things.
yeah, I think the the opportunity for us all as we go into the new year, certainly reflecting on the year that passed, right? And what went well and what didn't go well and what do we want to change moving forward. It is opportunity to reset, right? Turn the page literally on the calendar and do a reset. I think also, you talk about your, what we call the honeydew list, right? Like, your wife prepares for you. But many of us have a list professionally, right? Things that we want to do, things that we want to accomplish, skills that we want to build. For many of our MSP partners that we work with, it may be a set of initiatives with their customers, right? Like, hey, we've been delaying or putting off these kind of initiatives, but this is the year to get these things under control. And it may be establishing new services, new offering. We're going to talk about data protection today and why that's so important. Because ultimately, a lot of companies, their work product today is almost entirely digital, and it may be, that they actually have manufacturing processes or other things that they create, but all the work, all the designs, all the files, those kind of things are digital. And there was a story in the Wall Street Journal yesterday that I'm just going to read from for a moment. Manufacturer blames their bankruptcy on a cyber attack. The Houston-based United Structures of America, Inc., filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection Tuesday, saying a 2019 ransomware attack destroyed all of its servers, 400 computers, and assorted other machinery. The company paid a demanded ransom, but never got its data unlocked, said Dan Drake, the president of United Structures, in a court filing. Company lost financial, customer, and order data and has since been winding down operations. They were privately held, founded in 1980, and made metal buildings. So it's an unfortunate tale for that company, right? That ransomware attack, and they paid the ransom, but never got their data back, lost essentially their entire business. So what is that? A 39-year-old company um, that went because of a ransomware attack. So will it be more, that severe for most people? Let's hope not. But who picks on where were they? Houston, a metal buildings company in Houston, Texas. But that's the nature of cybercrime and ransomware at this point, is that it's taking down an entire business like that. So I think it's a chilling tale, but also one that if you were looking for something to talk to customers about and kind of justify why you might put certain protections in place, unfortunately, this is not the only tale. There are many like it around.
And it's interesting because technically, if you think about it, data is the not currency. And I have said that for years. I don't remember who exactly was the first one to use that term. But to see that a company that actually have financial capital goes down because their data was not available to them, it tells a lot. It tells us that we actually need to protect it, but not only protect it because probably they have some backups.
Hmm.
But if you don't have a complete protection, um, and we normally share different stories and different ideas, but if you remember at the end of last year, we got a big attack for Log4j
Hmm.
that actually enable remote access to data, and then they were able to do remote executions on it. It's interesting how companies sometimes still don't think that is a good investment in not only protecting the data, but to have a simple way to recover the data.
Yeah, and that's, at Data, we talk a lot, especially our Chief Information Security Officer, Ryan Weeks, talks about um, the Nist framework, and I'll put it in the, you've got the master chat, so I'll put it in our private chat, and then you can put it over to the gang here. But the point of the Nist framework, kind of where people get into, or what we're really talking about today, is recovery. The recovery comes at the end, after all the bad stuff has happened. And that bad stuff, like we're talking, we're starting off with a company that's filing for bankruptcy because of a ransomware attack, and kind of the worst case scenario, the entire organization is locked up because of ransomware, and they can't get out of it, and they're end up having this problem where they lose the company for it. It can be a lot less severe. It could be, uh, I came in today and I accidentally deleted some things, or I discovered that someone accidentally deleted some files and I need to get those back because it's for a customer presentation that's this afternoon, right? Like how do I get out of something like that? So there's obviously a broad spectrum of things here. In the case of the company we spoke of earlier, there's a whole set of things that could or should have been in place before the recovery step that would have prepared them, that would have protected them. So chances are there were many things wrong from a cybersecurity standpoint that ultimately led to them being infected with ransomware, having everything locked up, and then not being able to recover. And so I think from an MSP's point of view, this is a great reason to develop a service offering that has really kind of all those elements in place, so that we're protecting from the start. We're kind of designing with security in mind, protecting from the start all of the things that can happen. And then also, how would we detect and respond and recover, which are the pieces kind of after the bad stuff happens, whether it's a big incident or a small incident. And I think what ultimately partners can offer to their customers is that peace of mind to say, never say never, right? Like we can never say that we'll never be a victim of a cyber attack. However, we've done the following things to try to prepare you. And I think that when you're in this situation, and I think the building company is a good example, they would have paid, and they did pay ransomware, right? Like they paid the ransom. They would have paid probably a lot of money, millions of dollars, to get out of that situation when they're in it. Had they just been able to add a few $100s or maybe even a couple $1,000s a month in the period before that with their managed service provider to prevent that from happening, it would have been money well spent. And I think that the financial case or the ROI of this whole scenario is becoming more clear to more companies and should be apparent. So it's a good year to plan out kind of where do you want to go with this, and what would the elements of a successful plan be.
And it's like, I don't know if you remember, in the early 80s and 90s, as computers were developing, then the antivirus became the de facto. You needed an antivirus to protect you. And then all the pop-ups came up, so things were developed to protect for that. Now we're on the era where you actually need to protect your data in a different way. And I think you just mentioned something very important, that is, planning ahead can save you a lot of headaches later on. And I've seen that sometimes some of the partners look at, oh, what someone else is doing for protection, but they sometimes miss the recovery aspect,
Mm-hmm.
how to actually recover from something like that, or prepare a plan that says, okay, if something happened, here's how we're going to do it. We can test it, and we can test that plan. And that's one of the great things that we have, that our partners can test their disaster recovery plans even while they're in production without any issues. But to prepare and plan and execute, that is mitigating the risk.
Well, and that, as our CTO Bob Petroselli likes to say, backup is easy, recovery is hard, right? That a lot of people take for granted, and I think planning it, and there's the recovery time objective, and the recovery point, right? Like, how often are you backing up? So if you were to all of a sudden, something bad happen right now, what's the last backup time? And then how long is it going to take you to get back, right? And then so it's testing that stuff out, right? Understanding from a customer's point of view, what are their needs? And then if the recovery time is an hour, that's likely, pretty acceptable to most people. If the recovery time is days, what is the continuity solution that provides service to the users in the meantime? Can you so there are products that offer you that opportunity to spin it up essentially in a virtual instance, and now have the ability to carry on while the data recovery of those systems is underway. So I think there's a lot of scenarios, and again, ultimately, the more standardized in your service offerings from customer to customer you can provide, the easier it is for your team to support from a partner's point of view, right? If you have everybody has kind of their own kind of custom arrangement, then it becomes very confusing to support. But the more standardized you can become, the more effective you are in managing it, and managing the cost of it as well. Both from the people time as well as the delivery of the service, the software, and the hardware that's needed to support it.
Let me ask you a question. When you were leading teams, will you prefer something that will be managed by a company, or will you prefer something that was put together with parts from Best Buy or something like that, so you can save a buck?
Well, I'll tell you, this is I have two experiences maybe. One is, in our last house that we were in, it was brand new construction. The basement was completely unfinished. I went and got a quote from actually a family member, an extended family member who's in carpentry to finish the basement. And the price was like, oh, are you kidding me? Like, there's no way. I'll do it myself. Halfway through that, I would have paid any amount to get out of that, right? And like, I would have paid that and then some to get somebody else to finish the project. I mean, that's kind of one scenario. Same kind of thing. Like, I've got over on the desk over here a computer that my son and I built a couple of years ago. And we built it more for the experience, because having been in this business all my life, at this point, uh, I never actually built a computer from scratch, like go to Micro Center, get all the components, and come home and put them all together. So we did that. That one wasn't as bad, but I think it probably did take me 6 or 7 hours to put that together and get all the little pins connected to the motherboard, and everything set up and boot and install. So yeah, I think that I don't want, and this is from a customer's point of view, right? This is like, if you even in your home, if all of a sudden you had a plumbing something happens, the last thing you want the plumber or the electrician or whomever to walk in and say, wow, I've never seen that one before, right? Like, nobody wants to be out on their own with something unique. You want to say, can this is got to be something that other people have dealt with. There's got to be a formula or a recipe for how we do this. Can I just have the standard best in class service? Some people may roll out a kind of a good, better, best menu of options to customers. They're priced differently, obviously, for those different options. But I think as an MSP partner, you have to consider, like, if the customer isn't willing to choose the better or the best, do you even want to offer the good, right? Like, you've got to, what this means. It means you're going to get calls on your nights and weekends from a customer with a problem because they weren't willing to sign up for it, and now they're willing to pay any amount to get you to deal with it. And it's like, do you want that disruption in your own life? I don't think that's the case for many.
And that's funny, because that's what happened. You go on vacation. I actually have a friend of mine that he went on vacation, and exactly what he told his customer that was going to happen happened. So through his vacation, he needed to work to recover all the data, and the solution was a little bit of a pain. So after that, he switched his solutions to what he told the customer that will work. So thinking about all this, what should our audience should be looking for? Let's start with the cloud, because right now most people are trying to move to the cloud. They probably, their hardware have expired. They're looking at new services or new ways to protect. Probably they experience some actually physical or natural disasters. So they say,
Mhm.
hey, it's time to move our workloads to the cloud. and start leveraging it, what are some things that, as a leader, you're normally looking and thinking, hey, these are some of the key points that I should be focusing on?
Yeah, I'm going to drop another chat that you can share with the audience here around the shared responsibility model from Microsoft. It's one example. It's the Microsoft example. If you're using AWS or Google or Rackspace or anybody else, I would encourage you to look at that. I think people use the cloud for various things, but they don't necessarily understand what are the built-in services versus things that they need to manage themselves. So in this shared responsibility model, um, and they're using a lot of kind of technical jargon between SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, on-prem, right? But essentially what it's looking at is, what is the cloud hosting provider responsible for, and what are you responsible for either as the end customer or the MSP who's managing things on behalf of that customer. So I think it's important to always understand what are you getting for the service that you're utilizing? What are you responsible for versus them? And then how do you manage the risk associated with those uncovered pieces? And I think that's a really critical piece as you look at these cloud services. The reasons you mentioned about why to move to the cloud, old hardware, slow hardware, um, expiring versions of operating system databases, these things reach an end of life. I remember the days with Microsoft where things were in theory supported forever, but the reality is, there was a point at which they didn't want to have developers working on patching really old stuff, so they started creating the support lifecycle, as it's known, where you're going to end of life support on a product. That means no more patches, no more hot fixes, and then it goes into extended support or whatever, and then eventually it's completely unsupported. Um, so, again, you don't want to be out there on your own using unsupported versions of software longer than you have to. One of the benefits of being in the cloud is that you're going to have up-to-date version of Windows, SQL Server, whatever it happens to be for your core services. So that's a good conversation to have with customers about end of life on support. We don't want to be out kind of hanging in the breeze on our own. We'd rather be in a supported environment, the benefits of the cloud, but also don't take for granted that the cloud is just going to address all of your problems, right? That there are still some services that you would need to set up as the partner on behalf of that customer to provide the backup continuity support that they're going to require in the event of something happening.
And that comes with the idea of building that recovery plan. Because the cloud, like you mentioned, is going to help you have that infrastructure that you used to have on premise. Now you can leverage services. I remember when I had to manually code the proxies for the web servers
Hmm.
to do like a load balancer. Now I could just go click on a service and it
Right.
tell me, where do you want to send it? Oh, that's going to go to a different data center. That's going to go to your DR site. Perfect. And I used to have to do that manually, and it was a pain. And when I started moving resources to the cloud for the customers, it actually started being an ease for me because it was less things for me to focus on a
Hmm.
day to day. But now I needed to be aware of how my customer wanted that recovery. Some
Yeah.
customers may be okay with, hey, I'm 4 hours down, but my data is secure and you're working on it, no problem. Or the customers go, hey, I need to, my email need to always be up because I receive communications back and forth. Okay, so email, it's critical. So I need to have it on a service, Office 365, that actually take care of that. But I need to be able to protect that email. So
Right.
nothing coming in can affect it. If something get deleted, I can bring it back in a simple way. If it's a workload, then I can be able to recover those files or actually bring it up right away somewhere else, or even have a hybrid type scenario that if something happened, I can spin it up on the disaster recovery site, um, to provide that seamless transition between the two environments.
Yeah, and I think that's something that the seamless nature of computing is something that we all aspire to utilize, right? I remember Bill Gates at one point saying, computing should be as reliable as going into your going into a dark room and flipping the switch and the lights come on, right? That's how reliable, from an end customer experience, everyone wants it to be. Unfortunately, the way that we're all kind of used to it, people are used to hitting Control Alt Delete or getting the blue screen of death or reboot it and see if it works. And it's even a joke about Teslas, right, and like cars that are now using software. It's like, oh, just reboot it and see if that cures it. So there's a certain amount of challenge with computing that we're all used to, but the reality is people have very little patience for it. They just expect it to work, for services to be available, for data to move, for connectivity, for Zoom, right? Like there's very little uh, appetite for any downtime. Everybody has that kind of Amazon Prime mentality, right? Like everything I want it within seconds to arrive, and so I think that it's never been harder to be an MSP, right? And providing this kind of service to customers and addressing that uh, mentality that people have, where they want instantaneous satisfaction on every point. But I think, again, how you layer in core services to provide the protection up front, the backup and the recovery, and test the recovery, and show the customers. I think that um, not enough people test the recovery, and also doing a recovery demo for a customer. Show them, like, this is the scenario. Here's how it would go down, and here's how we would recover, to prove that it works and to show them the value of it. That I think seeing is believing. They may not understand all the technology and everything that takes to do it, and obviously simplifying it is part of what you offer to customers. But I think those are the important pieces that people really need to kind of see and understand in order to buy into it and say, yeah, okay, I understand why my bill is going to go up, by a couple $100s or thousands of dollars or whatever it's going to be a month, because this kind of scenario that you're describing, is more and more likely, and we need to protect ourselves.
So we started with the story from this manufacturer, and it was a bad situation what happened to them. But if we think about it, for each story that get published, there could be hundreds or even thousands that they prefer to stay quiet because they do not want to share that.
Hmm.
And if some of our audience is probably experiencing that, or they may have customers, as a leader, help us with what will be the thinking process that a leader sometimes look at. Truly, my data, that thing that lives on the computer, is the most important thing for my business? No, like what I do, the product is what is more important. What will be that thinking process that then our audience can use to share with their potential customers how they can help them?
Yeah, I think that there's an education component to it. I think about we have our own chief information security officer here at Datto. Um, I've got a friend who actually works for a medical device company as a chief information security officer as well. Um, those are people who are responsible for thinking about this 24/7. But if you're anywhere on the CEO staff, the executive staff of a company, you need a certain amount of cybersecurity knowledge to understand what's happening in the world today. And it's not necessarily, this is kind of the probability, is kind of, one could argue what the probability is. Um, but it's definitely a potential thing that could happen to, it's the possibility. That's the other word I was looking for, right? It's possibility versus probability. You could argue kind of the math on that of how likely it is to hit your company, but the reality is everyone needs to be protected to a certain extent. I mean, chances are you have LifeLock or some kind of service like that, identity theft protection. Um, Chances are everybody listening has that. You may have gone and signed up for it on your own because you thought it was a good idea to pay a couple bucks a month to get $1 million worth of identity theft protection. You may have it because a breach occurred, and whoever it affected, they gave it to you for a free year, right? Like if you start putting all those together, I could have 3 services, 4 services running at any time because of all the breaches. So no one wants to be the company that's mentioned in the Wall Street Journal and all of that. So I think there's a certain amount of education material that I would put in front of my customers to just kind of give them a picture of what's happening. And then I would move from that kind of problem or kind of high risk scenario into here's kind of a managed risk scenario of what we can do and how reasonable it is from both a price and an effort standpoint. and what life looks like when we're living in that scenario and how that protects us. It doesn't eliminate the risk, but it certainly mitigates that risk. To me, that's how I would start laying that out in front of my customers.
That's great detail for our audience. And thinking about that, having your data secure, your data lives in different places. So for our audience, make sure that you take the time to look, do I have data on a physical device? That may be a laptop. Do I have data in a local server? Do I have data in cloud services? And it may take a little bit of time, but thinking about putting all that as part of your strategy and how you secure them, because you're going to get the call. Hey, something happened. I remember one time one person called me and said, I lost all my iMessages from my um, Apple device. And I'm like, did you have them backed up? And then they were like, yeah, that was a problem. That when you have them syncing across all the devices, then they actually, I delete them one place and I lost them all. Well, first thing, you should not be keeping all those. They have, if I remember correctly, they have about like 13 gigabytes of text messages. I'm like, don't you know something called email or like save stuff on a document or something? But it was a call that arrived and I needed to then support them. So thinking about where your customers are using to do business and how you're going to protect them and educate them. You gave a great point. Part of the role of a service provider is educating the customer. I don't know if this happened to you, but you find a service and all of a sudden you start using them and you don't know what you're using it for, and all of a sudden you become really critical and you go, oh, wait, what do I do with this? And how do I protect it? And that happened to all of us. Like when I learned about that, they were doing business and keeping like literally the documents, they were going like 3 years to look for contracts. I'm like, don't you know that you can save that? It's like,
Yeah.
it's very important.
Well, and that's, that's another example. I think the text message one we can probably all relate to because, like, among my wife and my three kids, we have a family chat and we send pictures or different things, right? But I have mindset that after 30 days, I think it is that it kind of expires old messages, right? To kind of keep it size wise manageable. So I know if there's a picture that comes in that I want to keep from somebody, to save it to my iCloud, right? Like, so it's the little habits that users need education, but also if you were doing managed mobile devices, for an example, like you would know, like not everybody turns on iCloud, strange as that may seem, right? Not everybody does it. Sometimes my mother actually took an iPad on a trip and was taking pictures with it. Yes, she's people holding up the iPad taking pictures, right? Then she ran an update on the iPad and it didn't for whatever reason it didn't recover, and all those pictures were lost and it wasn't backed up
Ooh.
beforehand, right? So like these are kind of issues that happen unfortunately every day to people. For if it is a managed device, that's the responsibility of the business and the managed service provider. Like you're saying, identifying all the places where data lives, all the tools that people are using, the services third party that they're using, and mapping it into a plan. And as much as you can now start to standardize what are the roles and responsibilities, how do we support, what are the standard tools we do, can we use a backup solution that's going to go across all these environments and bring everything into one management console. That's obviously ideal from a service provider standpoint instead of logging into all these different tools and trying to connect things that aren't connected. So Lord knows it's more complex than it's ever been, but there's also more support from an industry standpoint, more vendors out there, like our team at Datto who are willing to help. There's definitely some planning that needs to go into it, and how you roll that conversation to an end customer. That's again, I think it requires a thoughtful approach, very education based. We're helping, not selling, in the way that we deliver this information to customers, and then obviously the rollout and making sure that it delivers as expected is really the key piece.
Well, my friends, It's been awesome to see you again. Today's topic was, why do you need complete protection? Make sure that you take care of your data. Your data is your most important asset that you have. And I use the word asset because it helps you grow your business, make more money, because that asset is where all your customers' information live. My friends, awesome to see you again. We'll see you next week with another topic here in Tech Conversation Secrets. See you, my friends.